Imagine standing in a courtroom, facing a judge, a prosecutor, and a jury of angry townspeople. You've been formally charged with murder. Your court-appointed lawyer stands beside you, ready to argue your case. One problem: you're a pig. This actually happened, repeatedly, for centuries. Animals were arrested, jailed, tried, and executed under full criminal law, with lawyers, testimony, and appeals. And that's not even the weirdest law humans have ever enforced. By the end of this video, you'll wonder how civilization survived itself. Here's the thing about laws. They never felt weird to the people living under them. Every single one of these laws solved a real problem, at least in someone's mind. Governments used law to control three things: status, morality, and fear. If you could control what people wore, you could control who looked powerful. And if you could control who owned gold, silk, or a beard, you could control the entire social order without lifting a sword. That's the logic behind everything you're about to see. It made total sense to them. It will make zero sense to you. Let's start relatively mild. Bread weight law. In medieval England, bread wasn't just food. It was regulated down to the ounce. The assize of bread and ale set exact legal weights for loaves based on the price of grain. Sell an underweight loaf and you could be fined, publicly shamed, or dragged through town tied to a hurdle. One London baker was caught shaving weight off his loaves so often that the courts gave him a nickname that translated roughly to the thief. Bakers got so paranoid about underweighing bread that some started adding an extra roll to every dozen just to be safe. Yes, that's where the phrase baker's dozen comes from. A law about bread fraud accidentally created a baking tradition that's still used today. Beard tax. In Imperial Russia, in 1698, Tsar Peter the Great returned from touring Western Europe and decided Russian men looked medieval, literally. His solution? Tax the beard right off their faces. Men who wanted to keep their beards had to pay an annual fee and carry a beard token as proof of payment. Legend says Peter personally shaved several noblemen's beards at a party just to make his point. Refuse to pay, and a soldier might just shave you on the spot, in public, without asking twice. For devout Orthodox men, a beard wasn't vanity. It was a religious obligation. Peter taxed their faith and called it fashion policy. Strange? Absolutely. Purple clothing law. In ancient Rome, one color was legally off-limits to almost everyone: purple. Tyrrhenian purple dye was made from thousands of crushed sea snails, making it more expensive than gold, ounce for ounce. So emperors simply banned commoners from wearing it, by law. Wear the wrong color in public and you could be publicly humiliated, fined, or in extreme cases, executed for impersonating imperial status. One emperor reportedly had a merchant killed simply for selling purple dye to the wrong customer. A pigment became a crime, and it only escalates from here. Sumptuary laws. In medieval Europe, purple wasn't the only fashion crime. Entire outfits were regulated by what's known as sumptuary law. Laws dictated exactly what fabric, fur, and jewelry each social class was legally allowed to wear. A wealthy merchant could legally out-earn a nobleman, but he could not legally outdress one. Wear silk above your station and inspectors could fine you on the spot, in the street, in front of your neighbors. The goal wasn't fashion, it was keeping the social ladder visible at a glance. Clothes weren't self-expression, they were a legally enforced class uniform. Mandatory church attendance. In Puritan New England, skipping church wasn't rude, it was a criminal offense. Colonial laws required attendance on Sunday services, and absences were tracked like a modern attendance sheet. Miss church without a valid excuse, and you could face fines, public stocks, or in repeat cases, banishment from the colony entirely. One Massachusetts man was fined multiple times simply for staying home to care for a sick family member, because illness wasn't always accepted as a valid excuse. Faith wasn't private, it was mandatory, monitored, and enforced with real punishment. Now let's move from religion to outright grief. No excessive mourning. In ancient Rome, there was a genuine problem. Funerals were getting too dramatic. Wealthy families hired professional mourners to wail, tear their clothes, and scratch their faces bloody in public displays of grief. It got so extreme that Roman law, dating back to the 12 Tables, placed limits on how loudly and how long people were legally allowed to grieve. Guards were authorized to intervene if mourning crossed the legal line into excessive. Imagine being stopped mid-sob by a government official because your sadness violated code. Venetian mask law. In Venice, masks were beloved. During Carnival, anonymity was a beloved civic tradition. Outside Carnival season, wearing a mask in public was frequently illegal. Officials worried masked citizens outside festival season were hiding criminal activity, gambling, or forbidden affairs behind their anonymity. Get caught masked at the wrong time of year, and you could be fined or arrested on the spot. The very symbol of Venetian celebration became a punishable offense 11 months out of 12. Now let's talk about grown men trying to kill each other over insults. Ban on dueling. In early modern Europe, for centuries, European nobility settled personal insults with swords at dawn with witnesses. Kings eventually banned dueling outright, since it was killing off their own aristocracy over trivial disputes. The law didn't stop the practice, it just drove it underground. Nobles began dueling in secret forest clearings at strange hours, specifically to avoid royal patrols. One French king reportedly lost more noblemen to illegal duels than to actual foreign wars during peacetime. Some men would rather break the law and die than lose face. And it gets pettier still. Luxury feast restrictions. In Renaissance Italy, governments passed laws limiting how many courses a feast could legally serve. Too many dishes at your own dinner party was considered a public offense, not just poor taste. Officials were authorized to enter private banquets and confiscate excess food if a household exceeded its class-appropriate course limit. One Florentine family was fined for serving sugar sculptures shaped like castles, considered an obscene display of wealth. Your own dining table could get you arrested. Now let's head to Imperial China, where the crime wasn't food, it was fun. No gambling during sacred festivals. In Imperial China, during sacred festival periods, gambling was strictly forbidden, even though it was tolerated the rest of the year. Festivals were meant for honoring ancestors and deities, not gains of chance. Officials patrolled festival grounds, specifically hunting for hidden dice games and card tables tucked behind temple stalls. Get caught gambling the wrong week, and punishments ranged from public beatings to confiscation of your winnings entirely. The irony? Festivals were often the most crowded, most tempting time to gamble, which is exactly why the law existed. Let's talk about jewelry, war, and outrage. Lex Opia law. In ancient Rome, during the brutal war against Hannibal, Rome passed a law restricting how much gold, colorful clothing, and luxury women could publicly display. The justification was wartime austerity. Rome needed resources, and visible wealth felt inappropriate during crisis. But when the war ended, the law stayed on the books for decades, long after the emergency had passed. Roman women eventually staged one of history's earliest recorded public protests, physically blocking the streets and surrounding the homes of officials who supported keeping the law. They won. The law was repealed. Which brings us to the single strangest legal category of them all. Animal trials. In medieval and early modern Europe, animals were formally tried in criminal court, exactly like human defendants. Pigs, cows, rats, and even insects were charged, assigned defense lawyers, and sentenced. In 1457, a sow in France was tried for killing a child, found guilty, and executed in full ceremonial dress, mimicking a human criminal. Her piglets were initially charged as accomplices, but were acquitted due to their young age. Yes, baby pigs had a legal defense of diminished responsibility centuries before modern criminal law formalized the concept. You'd think that's the peak of absurdity. It's not even close. The trial of the donkey. In 18th century France, in 1750, in the village of Vanvres, a donkey was formally charged with a capital crime. Under the law, the sentence for the offense was death for the donkey. But the donkey's owner didn't just accept the sentence. He organized a defense. He gathered a petition signed by the leading citizens of the village, formally testifying to the donkey's good character, gentle temperament, and blameless daily conduct. The signed testimony was presented to the court as legitimate evidence. And it worked. The donkey was acquitted, fully cleared, walked free. A four-legged defendant facing execution was saved by a petition of human neighbors vouching for its personality. Somewhere in 18th century France, a donkey had a stronger legal defense than most humans could afford. And that's the thing about weird laws. They weren't written by fools. They were written by people just as convinced as they were right as we are today. Which raises the real question. What law are we enforcing right now that people 300 years from now will find just as insane?